How can we give our kids and teens relief from social media pressure? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More.
Do you want to go deeper in your faith even while you're on the go? No matter how busy the season you're in, Access More has a library of faith-based podcasts to help you grow spiritually. With podcasts from Christian thought leaders such as Christine Caine, Lisa Harper, Taryn Wells, and Bob Goff. You can hear podcasts on religion, culture, family, entertainment, and so much more. Access More gives you a safe space to find inspiring conversations about faith. Start listening today at accessmore.com.
Today I have with me John Perritt, who is the Director of Resources for Reformed Youth Ministries. He has served in student ministry for over 20 years. He's the host of the Local Youth Worker podcast and is a frequent conference speaker. He's the author of several books, including his most recent, Social Media Pressure. Welcome, John. I am so delighted to have you on the show today. This is such an important topic.
Tina, thank you so much for having me on. Yes, you're right. It is very important, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about this.
So tell me what it is that really led you to this topic. I can only imagine how much of this you've seen in social media pressure in your own ministry.
Yeah, really, it's exactly that. Being in student ministry for over 20 years and just watching how this has, developed this new technology. As I've said, as I started out in student ministry, I can remember when students began walking in the youth room and they would be texting on their phones. And I was thinking, why would you text someone if you could just call them? You've got a phone. And of course, that's primarily what we do now is we text over talking. And so just kind of from that point to smartphones coming along to apps becoming so popular and seeing the increased concern of how this is impacting us. And as many people say, the research isn't even out there. I mean, these haven't been around long enough to really see what kind of an impact it's having on our students, but some of it we do know. And so, yeah, just being in student ministry and seeing the impact it had on students, that's what led me to really begin trying to develop this devotional for them.
And from a therapist standpoint, we know that children and adults will see some neurological changes if they are focused too much on blue light wavelengths and upon those quick reward systems that are kind of addictive, really, when you're dealing with social media likes and people just can't put it down. And that's true for adults and teens. What are you seeing that is specifically a problem for teenagers?
Well, I mean, it's really a lot of what you just highlighted, but I think if you kind of had to sum it up into maybe one big thing, and maybe the most concerning is just the screen time, the amount of time students spend on there. As you talked about addiction, talked about depression, anxiety. It seems like the research has said the strong correlation there is the amount of time students are spending on their devices, that, as screen time goes up, depression and anxiety typically do go up. And, from the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, to Adam Alter's book, Irresistible, we've learned that so many of these devices are designed to draw us back in, that they do have, as you were talking about, just kind of rewards in the brain and the neuroplasticity of the brain, forming habits for students. And so, yeah, I guess, again, summing it up in one thing, screen time would be kind of the main, maybe the big umbrella that a lot of these issues would kind of fall under.
And this is a developing brain when you're talking about children and teenagers, and the addiction and the exposure to social media is creeping backward in the age groups that it's affecting. And we're also seeing, due to the isolation of the recent seasons we've been through, that kids are more attached to their screens. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Isolation. I know that there was someone, I'm forgetting the author's name, but he had 10 charts that kind of sum up some ways in which our culture is shifting. And isolation was kind of the number two chart, that teens are reporting that they have less close friends, that they are, remaining in their rooms for extended periods of time, that there's a sense in which they're getting some kind of social interaction. And I always want to pull back and say that there are some good aspects to social media, that we know it can foster community, that technology is a gift from God that can be utilized in different ways. And so I don't want to just say there's no value there, but as students get this kind of small taste of community through some of the social media platforms, they are sacrificing real in-person community. And so, increased reports of loneliness, of isolation, that are very concerning, as you said.
And in-person relationships, as we know, are not the same as online on-screen relationships. There's a dehumanization that happens, and it leads to cyberbullying, comparisons, all kinds of other things. Can you talk about some of the problems of only relating to other kids online through social media contacts or video game contacts that kids make when they are playing video games in groups together?
Absolutely. I mean, as you kind of talked about the incarnational relationships, being together in the same, physical space, there's something about being around individuals that, we all have different personalities. God's gifted us with different personalities. And when we're actually looking in someone's eyes and sharing the same physical space, we act differently than when it is when we're alone. And so you're kind of blending the two when you're alone and you're engaging with someone through a social media platform. We know we oftentimes don't say things that we would say if we were in the same physical space with someone, that we may say things more candidly, more harshly. As you talked about cyberbullying, I mean, there's so much that's just fostering. I mean, there's certain, social media platforms that allow students to post anonymous messages without, any kind of consequence for what they say. And of course, some of these apps have just led to some of the harshest comments you can imagine. And again, going back to, as you're talking about the developing brain, it's very concerning to think about. The U.S. Surgeon General just had a report recently, I guess in the last couple of weeks, and it's the ages are getting younger with these devices, of 8 to 12-year-olds that have smartphone, that have various social media platforms, and you're thinking their brains are just in the middle of all this development, and how are these devices shaping them? It is concerning. I don't want to be an alarmist, but it is concerning for sure. And again, the U.S. Surgeon General is highlighting some of those sobering statistics.
That's right. And there are solutions to this. So that's why it is good for people to look up resources like your book that allows kids to engage in healthy levels online rather than retreating into only engaging with other students and other kids online, so that you don't really get that in-person contact where you learn to read social cues on facial and nonverbal, body language that we need to learn in order to interact with other people. And learning to be empathetic and compassionate doesn't really happen as well if you're only engaging online. So this is very important. How can people stay in touch with you and get a copy of your book that helps guide teens toward creating that balance of interacting well in person, not just online?
Yeah, thanks, Tina. So I work for Reformed Youth Ministries, and people can go to rym.org, and there's all sorts of resources that we have on our website. We have student conferences as well as training for youth leaders, for parents. In reference to the book, it is currently available on Amazon, and so people can go check it out on Amazon, as well as New Growth Press. So RYM produced this in partnership with New Growth Press, and right now, New Growth is offering the book at a 30% off, and they're extending that through the month of July. And so if people use the code RYM30, they can get it for 30% off. And so we definitely want to point people to New Growth Press's website, and as well as Amazon.
And in this second portion of our conversation with John Perritt, we're going to talk about some practical things that parents and teens, if you happen to be a teen and you're listening, can do to get relief from social media pressure. So let's talk about the pressure point. How can kids unhook from that pressure? Because I know even as an adult, there's times when I can't keep from grabbing onto my phone. There is a pressure to keep working on that social media post and checking to see if it's really getting anywhere. So how can teens get relief from that?
There are so many ways. Towards the end of each entry in this devotional, there's something called an alongside practice. And so as people work through the devotional, you'll see a lot of practical tips on how to engage with your social media and smartphone in a healthy way. Because as you said, we don't want to just throw it out altogether, but we do need to put some boundaries in place. And so there's a lot of just helpful suggestions, practical suggestions. I mean, one of the alongside practices is just to get together with your friends and go do something together, and not share it at all, to leave your phones behind. And obviously, since we're talking to teenagers, with your parents' permission, if they're okay with that, because I know parents want to get in touch with their students, but just try to encourage students to get together, go out to dinner together, go for a walk and a nature trail, something along those lines, and just try to do something like that to just get a break and to get off of the devices. Because as you said, as adults, we need to hold ourselves accountable as well, and to realize that while these devices can be helpful, and many of us, because of our callings and careers, we have to be on them to a certain extent, but then to also try to find those times to step away. And so, I mean, that's just, one practical example. I mean, something else is encouraging students to wake up without their device and to put their device to sleep before they go to sleep. And some of that I've borrowed from Andy Crouch's book, Tech-Wise Family. But I think it's just important to bookend our days without technology, and especially for students, to have time where they wake up in the morning, to go get some fresh air, step outside, to, brew a cup of coffee and, enjoy just something tactile, instead of picking up their device. And same as they go to sleep. I think that can just be very helpful. And studies have shown just the benefits of doing that.
I noticed two things in what you were saying. The first of all is bookending the day without technology. That is a place that is a sacred space we could put God in, right?
Exactly. Yes. And that's something too. So kind of gradually throughout the book, trying to encourage students to fill those spaces with God's word, as you said. A verse that comes to mind often is from Jeremiah: "The heart is deceitful above all else and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" And so for me, I've thought about, that means as I wake up and I get out of the bed, my heart is speaking lies to me. And as I go throughout my day, my heart is speaking lies to me. And so trying to get students to see that, as they wake up, as they go about their day, as they look in the mirror, getting ready, their heart is lying to them and is feeding them with so many lies that are destructive. And, as you get on social media, you think of all the comparison, all the body image issues that are related to social media. Well, if we're beginning our day in God's word, that doesn't mean all of those difficulties will go away and we're still going to be walking around with a heart that lies to us, but we are filling ourselves with truth, that God's word is truth. And we need truth to be speaking back to the lies. And so, yes, that's a definite encouragement that we want students to kind of book in those days as well with God's word and his truth.
It doesn't mean it won't affect you, but it's like taking plenty of antioxidants to give you the resilience you need so it doesn't destroy you and you can respond to it better. And I also noticed that you were talking about this in a way that sets it up so we can recognize it as idolatry. We can worship our phones and not realize that that's what we're doing. Isn't that true?
Oh, yes, for sure. And that's something, sometimes as we talk about idolatry, I mean, it can be discussed in a very shameful way or shaming, and but I do think, I mean, it's important for us to talk to our children that yes, their hearts, as Calvin said, are idol factories, that they're constantly churning out new idols, but we need to do that in a way as parents and as youth workers and older mentors in the lives of these students, in an empathetic way, to say, hey, we struggle in the same way. We make these devices idols just like you do, that there's nothing wrong with you, but this is just a reality of the fallen human heart, that we are going to be prone to turn anything and everything into a false god. And more often than not, these are good things that we're turning into a false god, not bad things. It's often things that can be good that we just make ultimate things and we begin to worship them. And so it's important to be teaching the next generation just these realities of their heart, even though it can be a harsh truth. It's truth nonetheless.
Well, that's the difference between God's good gift of conviction and the enemy's counterfeit of shame, is that
Hmm.
God's conviction helps us move forward. The
Hmm.
enemy's counterfeit of shame will always hold us back and put us down and not let us move at all. So if you are finding that when you're dealing with the social media pressures and feeling shame and not wanting to do anything and putting yourself down, that isn't from God. And I love that you're bringing this in a positive, forward moving, growth oriented perspective. And you've got practical steps that kids can do in each one of those devotional pieces. And that's important because we need to be tactile. We are
Hmm.
tactile human beings.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. And so often, it seems like we can finish a chapter of a book and then it's kind of like, okay, so what? So what do, what do I do now? And so hopefully some of those practices at the end of each entry is just kind of an action item. And some of them are creative, and some of them encourage creativity of, here's the basic idea, but utilize some of your own creativity and do this in a unique way. And so I hope that it just kind of drives home the main theme of each chapter and gives something tangible to the reader that they can act on.
It'll help them remember your message and creative acts, things that we do tangibly with our hands, like people used to do decades ago before we had cell phones that we worked on all day long. We were engaging different parts of our brain. So it's healthy for our neurology to do tactile activity. So you've got like a double bonus in your book there. So that's fantastic. How can people stay connected with your ministry and find more benefits and resources, plus get a copy of your new book?
Yeah, so if people go to rym.org, I'm the director of resources for RYM, as you said, and we have student conferences people can check out. We'll be starting those next week out in Colorado, and then Florida and Maryland and Texas. And we also have training that people can be a part of. And then through our resources, we have a podcast, as you said, the local youth worker, so people can check out our work there, as well as free Bible studies people can access. And then in reference to the book, right now it's on Amazon available, and New Growth Press, people can check it out there as well.
So, what is one takeaway, one last thing, if you had to leave the audience with something that you would want every audience member to hear?
Yeah, well, I think, as I think of the adults who are listening, if they're youth workers, if they're parents, counselors, I think it's important for us to realize that conversation is something that's very powerful. We can think it's just, something kind of common every day, but our students are longing for adult interaction, and our students are often lectured to every day when they go to school, by their teachers, by coaches, and they want someone to listen to them. And so I think for us as adults to, I think with especially social media, parents can feel ill-equipped sometimes and can think I'm not the most tech savvy person, so I don't know what to say. But I think just sitting down and listening to your student, listening to your child, and really listening and trying to understand what it is they're wrestling with. And I just think that will go so far with the next generation, is just having adults sitting down and engaging in conversation with their children or students, and learning from them, as they share about some of these social media platforms that we're clueless about, but trying to walk alongside with them. And I hope this devotion can be a part of that. I mean, it's in a sense, it's a script to sit down and to engage with someone else with these issues. So that's kind of a final word, is to sit down and to have conversation and to listen.
And each chapter has that alongside part, which is so
Mhm.
important. And I
Mm.
love what you've said about listening, because listening is loving. It's just
Mm.
great insights. Thank you for coming on the show today, John.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tina, for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope that all of you listening were encouraged, inspired, and informed by this conversation with John Perritt. And I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.